Hello everybody, my name is Michael, and in today's video what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building up some market stalls slash merchants tents for your tabletop miniatures games. So if that looks exciting to you, please carry on and watch the video. Okay, so what I've decided to do here is I've decided to lay some of the tools out that I'm going to be using for the project, and as you can see here there's quite a lot to go through. So we've got some popsicle sticks here, we've got some wooden dowels, we also have some matchsticks, as well as that we also have a cutting device, a little hobby knife or hobby saw that we have here, some hot glue if you want to use some hot glue here to help speed up the process, also have some Mod Podge. PVA glue could also be used. As well as that, I also have a wood stain, but you could go with regular paint as you want here. As well as that, I also have some baby wipes here, and I'm going to be using this for sort of the canvas of the tent itself. So with all your stuff here that what I'm going to be using, let's carry on to start building this project. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to start off with grabbing a miniature here, and this here is Lydia from Skyrim miniatures set. I painted her up in a video a little while ago. Actually, I'll probably put a link up somewhere if you want to see that. But main thing I want to be having her for is I'm going to be using her as a sort of rough scale measurement that I want our tents and that to be, because a lot of miniatures have their arms above their heads wielding some sort of weapon, or they can be a little bit taller, so I want to be having that as sort of a scale here. And you can see that I'm measuring it out with, roughly with a ruler here. No exact measurements I've got here, it's a lot of feeling here, but you can see it was roughly about 5-6 centimeters. As well as that, I also have a cutting mat with some lines on there as well, so I can keep it nice and straight. You want to make sure you want to keep all the edges nice and even as well. And as you can see, using a hobby saw to cut through here, and you'll find that I have a little bit of trouble with this. This is a nice cheap hobby saw I brought, but I'm going to actually switch to a different hobby saw here because I couldn't get it all the way down. There's sort of like a little gap in it, so I was finding that a bit of a pain. So switching to our little hobby saw here to cut these bits down, and you can see that it's cutting through nice and easily, just spending a little bit of time to get through there. But my big hands are in the way, so it's making it nice and uneven. But of course, and you can see we can get our height there and try and measure it up to as roughly as we want to be, so you can see sort of how high I want it compared to the miniature itself. Then once we have those pieces picked out, I'm actually going to be doing another lot here, which is going to be just a little bit shorter, probably only a couple of centimeters as well here. I didn't actually put this with my other one, I sort of forgot, and came up with a sort of better idea that I wanted to have our tents on sort of an angle. So I'm going to be making the front ones a little bit taller than the back supports, just to give it that sort of angled height look, and it's on a bit of a lean. So that's why I'm cutting up some more here and trying to get that sort of effect of how merchant tents look, especially in like fantasy artwork and stuff. And then also, while I was cutting the second back piece too, I also should mention where you're cutting these pieces up to. It's also great that when you cut the first one, you've got that measured to how you like it. You want to grab your second one, place it up against it, and then cut along the edge, so you can have them both at the same height. That way, at least if the measurement's off a little bit when you're cutting and you cut that second one, they'll be the exact same height, just to save out on any wobbling issues with our tent here. And it's just a matter of coming in and really giving it a good saw through here. You might want to use something a little bit better than I was using, but I definitely didn't want to snap it, so I wanted to make sure that it cut straight through and leave a nice clean cut. And also you can remember to file the edges off as well while we're cutting up these frames. Okay, so now we have these pieces caught up, and you can see that I said that I was going to file up some of these edges. You can see I've just got a little hobby file here. This was one for tidying up miniatures. You could also use little files you can buy from hardware stores as well. I didn't actually have any on hand. All I had was my little ones that I use for cleaning up miniatures themselves, but they work great because you don't want anything too rough. You could also use a little bit of sandpaper there, and I'm just filing down those edges so they're all nice and smooth and we don't have any sort of nasty sort of like wispy bits on the miniature, so it keeps them all nice and even and smooth. Okay, now with all those base supports picked out and cut up, we're going to come in now with some coffee stir sticks, and what we're doing is just cutting the edges off them, making them sort of one plank of wood. And I'm using coffee stir sticks here rather than popsicle sticks because they're a little bit narrower and longer as well, so it looks a bit more like a real plank of wood in scale rather than a popsicle stick, especially for what I'm doing here. And you can see here you can either use a pair of scissors or a hobby knife here, but there's one reason why I'm going to be using the hobby knife is because when you use a pair of scissors there's a very good chance that it can crack and fray the edge, so that's why I'm going to be using the hobby knife here to really help me out and give that nice even sort of flush cut that I want, making it look. Now if you're going for more of a shabby look, maybe scissors are the way to go and you can get that, but as you can see I've got a nice even straight edge that just needs a little bit of filing, cleaning up, and it's not frayed and broken. It'd be great if I was doing sort of a rundown merchant stall, but I don't want to be doing that. I just want to be using a nice clean, you know, this is a well off merchant, so you can file that down and really give that a nice clean even edge. Then once we have that complete and we've got all our ends cut off, now we can sort of roughly construct what we're after here. And as you can see, we've got our rough sort of length that we want here, and that's that angle that I was talking about by making those front ones a little bit taller than our back ones here. Sort of basically I've made the front ones about 6 or 7 centimeters high, and the back one's about 4 to 5 centimeters high, so we get that nice angle there. And as you can see, I'm measuring it up to give a rough distance, and I've got it, what do we have here, roughly at about 7 centimeters or so, to give it that rough sort of look. Basically I've decided to make it sort of like it's about 2.5 miniatures could fit in there wide, to give it that sort of appearance of you know, a merchant's tent where you can look around a little bit, just trying to make it look as realistic as I said. Like no exact measurements here. A lot of what I'm building here is by feeling, to try and make it look I'd rather have it look right than try give some measurements to you guys and it looks off, so just going by feeling, as you can see here. Then once we have that cut out, it's just a matter of coming in and picking out our rest to the exact same size. Now we want to be having 2 beams for each side of our market stand here, because I want to have 2 planks of wood running along. You could of course have 1, or you could have 3. You could even make it a whole wooden wall across here if you wanted to, but I'm just going with 2 simple planks, and of course we're using the same technique again to cut them so that they're all nice and even if my measurement's off slightly. Okay, so once I have those 4 sides picked out, there's one more I want to do, and I've just cut the very edges off because I'm not sure how long I need this one to be. And you can see that this one's a lot longer than the rest, because I'm going to be using this as the sort of front-on piece that you're going to be seeing here, so how wide it is. And you just want to decide how wide you want to go with it here, and I believe with this I go roughly about 10 centimeters long, or as these 2 squares are on my cutting mat here, which I think is roughly about 10 centimeters. Yes, yeah, so about 10 centimeters wide, so sort of enough to fit a few miniatures in there, so you can have a real good looking scene, and make it so you can fit a few in there, because you don't want it so it can just have one teeny miniature squeezed in there. You want a little bit of room, and especially make it look more impressive on the table as well. You don't want that size to be roughly about right, and that's of course why I'm keeping the miniature there as well, to keep those sizes all intact. And just as a quick note, there's one other thing I want to point out that I'm doing here that I shouldn't be doing, is I am holding this hobby knife by the blade, and this is going to lead to some nice unfortunate accidents onto me while I'm cutting this piece up. As you can see, I've hurt myself a little bit there because I'm pushing it down so hard instead of letting it saw through, but because I wanted to catch this as quick as I could on camera of me cutting through, I've cut my finger here. So a lot of blood, sweat and tears actually went into this project, as you can see here. So be careful if you've got a hobby knife like mine. The back of it is just as sharp as the front. So now that I've patched myself up from bleeding to death, I can move on here, and what I've done is I've grabbed some baking paper slash cooking paper, parchment paper, whatever it's called in your country. My country, baking paper it's called, and I'm going to be placing this here on my cutting mat so I don't get any of this wood varnish on my nice cutting mat here, especially since I'm using it for measurements and stuff. So you want to do is we want to grab a nice sort of crappy old brush that we've got here, one that you're not too worried about throwing away, and then we just want to use it to be painting over all of our wood parts actually. So one other thing I'm doing here is, rather than constructing it then then painting it all up, especially with our wood stain that we've got here, as I found I made a test piece a little bit earlier and I constructed it all before staining it with our wood stain here, is where any of the glue was, the wood stain would run immediately off and you would see that little area where the glue had dried, whether it be hot glue or PVA glue or Mod Podge, anything like that. It would leave these areas where the stain couldn't get through. So that's why I'm going to be applying to the stain now and all of these pieces of wood first before I assemble everything, so we can get a nice clean even color across our piece without any sort of like marks where we don't want our stain to be, and some unsightly bits where it just won't run. But of course, if you're painting your market stall here and you're not wood staining like mine, perfectly fine to go ahead and paint it afterwards, because you can easily paint over top of any glue that you've got. So just a tip here if you're wood staining it rather than gluing it. Then if you have all your pieces of wood stained like mine, you can start assembling them now. So as you can see, I accidentally missed a couple of pieces I needed to add to my framework here with my coffee stir stick, so I had to quickly stain some more too as well while I was giving a rough estimation of how I was going to get it. Also, one thing when you're building anything like this, make sure you dry fit and rough test it before you move on to any gluing, because it's going to save you a lot of headaches in the long run and any places where you didn't want things to quite work out. But on top of that, also good practice to learn as well when you're building anything like this. And it turns out, even as I was building this here and it stained up these extra pieces, I didn't actually end up by needing them. I mainly used them here just to hold up our round dowel on top of our wooden planks here, to hold them there so it didn't leave any sort of warping issues or it trying to roll off. So keep that in mind too. You're always dry fitting and sort of practice assembling it to make sure you're getting it exactly how you want before you have the pieces as you want here. But also too, while building this too, this also could have been another awesome design by just placing these little planks here too. So other ideas as we're coming up even now while I'm doing the voiceover and building these pieces. Then once we have those side bits assembled, we can move on to assembling the front and the main structure of our piece. So we've got our nice long piece that we have here, and what I've grabbed is I've just grabbed some little clips so I can hold these bits together. Now you could also use hot glue here to assemble this super quick, and you wouldn't need to worry about these clips like I have with the Mod Podge. But for me, I am very new to crafting and I'm not so good with the hot glue. And I got angry with myself because I kept burning myself and not getting the glue right, or the glue would dry before I even put the thing together. And I just got sick of it and decided to go out, buy some clips to hold on with the Mod Podge because I was getting that frustrated with it. But eventually in time, if I do some more crafting projects, what I think I'm going to do, I might get a little bit more confident with the hot glue gun, but I was getting sick of burning myself and having things not attached the way I wanted to. So I went out, bought me these clips to help out with the project. But you may be a little bit better with hot glue than me, so you can skip this step here and just apply some nice hot glue onto the miniature to get it all done up nice and quickly. Then once we have our pieces all placed together, we're going to come in now with some matchsticks, and this part here I sort of needed to get the rough guessing while it was completely fully assembled rather than painting it up beforehand, although I still could have stained them all at the same time. That's just me being a little bit forgetful, but this was sort of a last minute addition add-on to the piece. I wanted to add on some little cross beams alongside it to give it a little bit more realism on the piece here. And you can see that the glue finally dried with my clips and it came out nice and straight and exactly how I wanted it without the hot glue. So you can get around hot glue if you don't have hot glue or you don't want it. And you can see here that that's what our cross beams are going to be like when we attach them to as well. Okay, so once we have our cross beam attached, now we're going to use my sort of secret technique thing that I came up with, which is, well, I don't know if I came up with myself, so I'd say probably heaps of crafters have come up with it before, but using baby wipes as sort of the canvas tinting material for my market stall here. It's really good in the scale that we're using as well. and it's quite like this one here. I brought the extra thick and soft one to give it that more material look. I would highly probably recommend that over any type of thinner one, because it can very easily be see-through and break a lot easier. But as you can see here, it's just a matter of coming in and cutting it down to size. As well as that too, I've also chosen one without a pattern. I want to keep it nice and plain and simple. But if you wanted to add in a pattern to your sort of tenting material, you could easily just go out and buy some that have patterns on them. I definitely know you can buy some baby whites that have some sort of weird pattern on them, but for me, I just wanted them nice and plain and keep that super simple. And one little thing with the material that we have here with these baby wipes is they're a little bit harder to cut, but don't worry, they're not impossible to cut. Maybe I'm just using some blunt scissors here. And then it's just a matter of coming in and cutting it out to the size you want. And you can see I'm cutting it straight in half, but I'm going to be using this as a thing to just drape completely over. Now, I'm not using it to cover the sides or anything. I just want it straight over the middle. I did do another one, which was my test piece, where I actually had it draped over and wrapped around. So you'll see two different styles when we come to the end of the piece as well with my practice piece. But for this one, I wanted to keep it very sort of classic fantasy artwork style. Then once we have our base for our material picked out and the size we want it and cut out, what we're going to be doing now is giving it a paint job, of course, but of course making sure that it fits over. And you can see how I'm going to have it here. I'm going to have it just slightly draped over, and it's going to show off that wooden framing a lot too. What I found with my test piece that I placed over top, as you'll see here, I folded it over. You can see the two different styles that we have here. I wanted to have two different styles, and my test piece came out good, but I also wanted to switch it up for this piece here, and I like the way that it just draped over the middle too, giving it that more sort of classic tent appearance. And as you can see, I've painted this up using the exact same material, but what I did do is I applied this and glued it on first and then painted it afterwards, and it left some sort of staining areas and places where it didn't paint. So I'm going to paint it up first, and to do that I'm going to be using contrast paint. Now, I don't know if I'd recommend contrast paint because it is so expensive to use. However, it is great for seeping straight in and putting on a really good pigment layer to it. But using ordinary paint is just as perfectly balanced and fine too as well. So use what you want to do here. I just really like the color that this Warp Lightning contrast paint had, so I wanted to use it for my piece. And it really seeped in nicely and really spread around the actual baby wipe itself as well. Also too, one thing when you're doing this is wait for that baby wipe to dry up of all its alcohol. Sort of like leave it out of its packaging for an hour or so. Really let it dry up before you apply any paint or anything to it. Just a little tip there. Okay, so once you have that painted up how you'd like it, you can see it's come through, but you can still see the see-throughness of the material. That's one thing I did find with the contrast paint compared to regular paint, is you didn't sort of get that natural material sort of look and effect. But I recommend for the price it is to use contrast paint and how much you'd be using here. It's probably not really worth it. It's easier just to paint it up. So up to you what you want to do here. I just had contrast paint. I really liked the color, and that was what was set on my mind rather than worrying too much about the cost. But as you can see here, I'm applying some Mod Podge to some water, really diluting it down to give it that nice, good overall coating. And what I'm going to do is dunk that with our painted up tent material straight into the mixture here. So, and then place it over and droop it in the way that I want it sort of appearing, and let that dry, and that'll also help to adhere it straight to the framework itself of the tent. And you can see here me placing it and giving it a really good soak, and me being impatient because I've already cut myself and bled, and I had trouble with the hot glue, and now you can see that I didn't even wait for this paint to fully dry. So me being a little bit impatient here, maybe you might want to spend a little bit more time. As well as that, I also had to get the video made as well, so a little bit of a time crunch here. But you can see that it came out perfectly fine. The paint was mostly dry, so I wouldn't recommend having it while the paint is wet because it'll run straight off. But as you can see there, it's just a matter of coming in and lining up how you want it to, and it gives it off a great material effect, especially when it's placed over. As well as that, it's also going to glue it to the actual piece itself too. And with that, our piece is complete, and we finally have our merchant tent slash market stall complete. And as you can see, I've set up a little scene here with some of my miniatures around a little town square sort of scene, so you can see what they are like in action. And I think they came out really nice, and I hope you guys find these useful and helpful, especially for my first sort of DIY craft build for miniature tabletop. I'll tell you what, I had a lot of fun, even though I bled, I cried, I burnt myself, I did a lot of things that a new person I think would do as well, and I hope you enjoyed what I've accomplished here. I know I have, for all the pain and suffering it caused, but I really like the way it turned out, and it looks great on the table as well, so I hope it looks good to you. And please leave a like and a comment if you'd like to see me do some more sort of crafting builds and stuff like that. But with all that said, guys, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I can't wait to see you all in the next video.